Then a second thing happened. First of all, there were these loans being made. There was then the decision that we should increase the number of people in America who own homes. And I don't look, my role in this has obviously been some discussion. I am very proud of one thing, and there's a guy named Larry Lindsay who served in the Reagan and both Bush administrations as the top economic advisor. He was finally fired by the last President Bush. Larry Lindsay, he was his chief economic advisor, and he said a terrible thing, and George Bush fired him. He said that the war in Iraq would cost $200 billion. Now, he should have been fired for underestimating it by someone. But he was in fact fired because he dared to suggest that it was going to cost 3 times as much as Dick Cheney had said it would. I'm very proud of the fact that he said I was one of the few politicians who was consistently saying helping very low-income people get mortgages is a bad idea, because putting people in a situation where they get mortgages that they cannot pay off and homes that they cannot manage is not a good thing. And one of the big fights I've had with this administration was, how do you help low-income people get homes? I believe that for many people, decent rental housing is the right way to go, as opposed to home ownership. I had an argument with a man named Alfonso Jackson, who was Secretary of HUD under George Bush. And he said, you know, about the Section 8 voucher program, where you get rental assistance. He said, I'm going to cut people off Section 8 after 5 years. I was the senior Democrat, I was in the minority, and he said, will you support that? I said, no. He said, why? I said, well, what happens to people after 5 years? I mean, actually, he said, would you support cutting people off rental assistance for the poor after 5 years? And I said, yes, if you'll support them not being poor after 5 years. But I said, well, Mr. Secretary, here's the problem. What will happen to these people, these families, after 5 years if they lose their rental assistance? And he said, we will help them become homeowners. That was the problem. And I look, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's role was about there. The problem with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac came, and I thought they were playing a useful role. And then in 2004, under Secretary Jackson, the Bush administration ordered Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to increase the number of mortgages they bought from people below the median income. And I went back, people said, well, how did all this happen? I found this quote for myself. I didn't remember saying it. I knew I had this general view in which I said that was a terrible mistake. It was bad for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and it was bad for these people. Now, part of the problem was that Greenspan had refused to stop the bad loans from being made. In 2004, and there's a very useful book I recommend if people want to go further into this. I'm going to finish this up in a few minutes and go to the questions. A man named Mark Zandi, Z-A-N-D-I, who was an economic advisor to John McCain. By the way, I will say of John McCain that his first choice for Secretary of Treasury was going to be Senator Phil Gramm, who was the regulator who then said we were all whining about the economy, so we got rid of him. And the next guy who clearly was going to be John McCain's Secretary of Treasury was a man named John Thain, who you may have read about, the head of Merrill Lynch, who gave those bonuses in advance of the sheriff showing up. But Mark Zandi was an economic advisor to John McCain. He's been a very bipartisan guy. And he writes in his book, in 2004, the Bush administration decided that it was going to greatly increase home ownership. This was going to be their social contribution. And when they did that, we became worried. And in 2004 and 2005, a group of us in the House, mostly Democrats, but one Republican, frustrated by Alan Greenspan's refusal to use the authority we gave him, which was discretionary, tried to pass a law to prevent these excessive subprime mortgages from being granted. And we were in the midst of negotiations, and Tom DeLay sent word to the chairman of the committee that I served on as a minority member, stop it. We're Republicans. We don't do that. In 2007, when the Democrats won the majority and I became chairman of the committee, we did several things. We passed the bill, by the way, to regulate Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which the Republicans never did. I know people would say, what was I doing about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Let me address this one head on. The Republicans were in control of Congress from 1995 through 2006. Their argument is that I stopped them from regulating Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Let me tell you this. If I could have stopped first Newt Gingrich and then Tom DeLay from doing something, there would not have been an impeachment of Bill Clinton. There wouldn't have been a war in Iraq. There would have been big tax cuts for very wealthy people. We wouldn't have tried to interfere in the Terry Schiavo case. I mean, the list of things I would have done would have been pretty long, that I would have kept them doing.